A warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined here in the first and second segments by one of our good friends, Ivetta Abramyan. She does an incredible job over at Bracketeer.org. She also does an incredible job just in general with her year in and year out college basketball stadium tour, as well looking at this incredible game of college basketball. We're going to chat it up with her about these NBA draft decisions. We've got a ton of impactful ones, so we're going to split it up into two parts. We're also going to be talking a little bit about some of these transfer moves that we are seeing in college basketball. Some of these teams are looking to fill out their rosters as well, so lots to chat about with Ivetta here in the first two segments of the podcast. Then in the final segment, I'm going to give you guys a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball on Friday. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, there's they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I certainly do beg with you and plead with you to send in these Twitter/X questions, because we've got a lot of days until the college basketball season is going to be up and running, so please do fire those in. I would love to be able to know what's all on your mind with regards to college basketball, but like I said, what's on my mind right now is a lot of NBA draft decisions, and it's my job on this podcast to be able to give you a great show day in and day out, have great guests, and Ivetta Abramyan, she certainly fits the bill. She's doing great work over at Bracketeer.org. I know that she's out there in the great state of Florida holding it down there. She does her college basketball tour every single year where she attends just so many games. It's incredible content, to say the least. You're able to follow her on the old Twitter/X at her first last name, Ivetta Abramyan. That's Ivetta, and then last name is Abramyan. And Ivetta, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Hi, Greg. Great to be here as always. Thank you for having me. I guess it's these little checkpoints, right, that make the off season go by faster. We had the portal opening being one of them. And of course, now we have the looming May 27th NBA draft deadline, where we get to find out who withdraws and returns to college.
Yes, we certainly do. That's a little bit less than 2 weeks away as we record this. And who are the decisions that you take a look at the most? Because as we both know, fewer underclassmen entered in the draft than in past years. But I feel like the amount of decisions that we have, even though it's a little bit less than in past years, I feel like they're even more impactful, because I think that the guys that do have the big 50-50 decisions right now, they could really sway if they're in the portal. One team's hopes if they do/do not get them. And in the case of Tyler Tanner, if he returns to Vanderbilt, I think that would be a massive, shall we say, swing for them if he does/does not return to the Commodores.
Exactly. And I think based on what we have right now, as far as who's still in and who hasn't made their decision, or at least not publicly, I tend to lean that more of these guys are actually going to come back, just based on some of the combine stuff we've seen. Of course, everything is speculative and fluid. We don't know if and when someone will change their mind or if their circumstances change. But of course, you have to fully buy into that draft process. You have to announce your full intentions to remain in the NBA draft, even if you still have one or both feet in that college doorway. And you have to strategize, right? So a lot of these players, they're going to wait to see who else withdraws, to see if they can move up some spots. You've got their agents in their ear trying to leverage their clients for bigger paychecks. You also have to consider that there's likely going to be a weaker draft class next year. So that can open up some doors for some of these guys who are going to attempt to get drafted next season. I agree. Tyler Tanner is one that I also think will end up coming back. Another guy is Alan Graves. I know that he went out and said LSU and Duke are the two schools that he's had conversations with right now. Of course, he announced that he has full intents to stay in the draft, but his door is not completely closed. And based on his draft feedback, he could reassess that. I don't think he's had a great combine based on some of the stats. So I could definitely see him coming back maybe to LSU. Maybe that would be a good fit for him. Matt Abel is another one of those guys. So the former NC State guard. So he committed to North Carolina. I think he's coming back. He had a strong afternoon in scrimmages, but he's one of those guys. So he's likely available in like the 20s to the 40s range of the draft. So he's got size and shooting ability. His production wasn't super consistent in his 1 year at NC State. I think that he's going to come back. I know he publicly said he's back and forth, but I think he's coming back. I know he said he wants a first round promise, but obviously that's not guaranteed because things change all the time. He wants that reassurance. But North Carolina also just signed his high school teammate, Kevin Thomas, for the 2026-27 roster. So I think maybe that will have some impact on that as well. So definitely those guys. And then I also feel like Koa Pete's going to come back. I know he's one that, again, we're not really sure, but I think he could definitely benefit from another year. Amari Allen is another one. We saw what happened with LeBaron Philon last year, right? He told reporters, they asked him if the door was closed on him coming back to college. And he said, I quote, yes. And Nate Oates got him back. So I think Amari Allen already stated that if he's going in the second round, then he's coming back. I mean, he's going to be the guy. He's going to have the ball in his hands next season. There's all that stuff that happened with him coming in shorter than expected during his combine measurements, right? So yep. I think what it said 6'8" in his Alabama roster bio, but he measured at like 6'5.25". He came in undersized, but he still has that monster 42.5 vertical. I think it ranked him tied for second among all the players in attendance. But I think there's just too much waiting for him at Alabama, being that he would be their primary on-ball option next season. He's not going to be that secondary playmaker anymore. So I think it's going to be really hard for him to turn that down, especially if they want a chance to make a run to be one of the top teams in the nation.
Yep, I think so as well. And it's going to be really interesting to see a lot of those guys out there in the SEC, as I think that they might have the conference with the most decisions, as Ivetta Abramyan does great work over at Bracketeer.org, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, because we just sliced it out with Tyler Tanner, because I think that in terms of what he means to his respective team, that might be the biggest decision out there. Maybe not that he's the best prospect overall, but I think the way that he sways Vanderbilt is huge. But you mentioned something interesting with Koa Pete, because I've thought for the longest of time that he probably was going to be staying in the NBA draft. There have been a lot of places that have projected him as high as like a lottery pick. Maybe his stock has fallen a little bit, because I noticed in the combine workouts, three-point shot wasn't great. We all knew that when he was over at Arizona as well. But if he returns to Arizona, is there a case for them to be up there with Florida and Duke, who I feel like are the top two teams in college basketball right now, as perhaps being a third team that you have to consider as perhaps that preseason number one, because they're already getting back Montevis Krivas. I recognize that they lose some of the backcourt from a season ago, but bringing back Pete, bringing back Krivas, so many of those big men, Churchinoff, who he's a international man that had a nice year last year as well. It feels like with Arizona, they could be a team that could be in the top 3, top 4 if they get Pete back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, he was already pretty polished as a 5-star freshman. But I think if he comes back, especially with the experience that, they already made it to the Final Four, I 100% agree. I think they need him in order to have a run like that. And yeah, like you said with Tanner, I think Vandy would be, at least a top 15 team with him. Malachi Moreno's another one of those guys where there's weird things going on with his agent, and he didn't participate in the combine because his agent said he believes he's in good shape to be drafted. And, it's one of those things where are they playing like a leverage game? What is he going to come back? Then you got a couple guys that you're expecting like Chinelu and Badunga. You're already kind of counting on those teams with those guys on board. They would make a huge difference, even though those rosters, Florida and Louisville's rosters are stacked regardless. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. And yeah, I definitely think some of these guys, Stojakovic is another one of those guys. I think he's going to come back. His athleticism definitely showed, but he struggled shooting, especially from deep. That is one of the concerns that the NBA had with him. If he comes back to Illinois, they're building a fun schedule, as you know, some of the non-conference games. they're starting that series with Duke. They're playing Texas Tech. I mean, they're going to be a fun team to watch. So absolutely. Some are going to have more impact than others. And I think most of these guys are going to wait. They're going to ride out the full 2 weeks. I don't think we're going to get too much information here between now and May 27th.
Yep, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what we get in the next few weeks as well. And I want to talk about this with Ivetta on the flip side. Malik Thomas is a guy that I feel like has been just not talked about enough in terms of these NBA draft decisions. I think that his is huge for Arkansas. We've got quite a few big decisions in the NBA draft in the SEC, so we'll hit upon any of the ones that we have yet to there. And additionally, we have to take a look at some of the impactful transfer moves that we've seen over the last few days and some teams that they might not be adding big-time guys, but they're looking to fill out their rosters right now in the transfer portal. We'll talk about that with Ivetta on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. So it's myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ivetta Abramyan. She is doing such great work over at bracketeer.org. She just does an incredible job all 12 months of the year. Taking a look at this great game that we all know love of college basketball. You're able to follow her on the old Twitter /X at her first and last name, Ivetta Abramyan. That's IVETTA all together. And Ivetta, we've been talking a lot about these NBA draft decisions. One that we have yet to mention, the man from Arkansas, Malik Thomas. I just believe that he's going to return to Arkansas because he was a nice player last year, but he was obviously playing second fiddle to Darius Acuff. How do you take a look at that decision for Arkansas? Because I think that Arkansas has a lot of potential if he comes back, and I think that he can be maybe not quite what Darius Acuff was this last season, but I think that he can put up some monster numbers, and if he returns to Arkansas, that would be massive for them too.
Yeah, I think Malik Thomas is going to come back as well. Based on how these guys have performed, I just think it's going to be more beneficial for a lot of them to return. But I think he's going to come back. He didn't talk about it. He said TBD because he was projected in the late first or early second round. But then there's Billy Richmond. Both of them might come back, in which case, yeah, I think Arkansas is going to be a different looking team as well.
Yep, and with Arkansas, certainly a team that is going to be based around guard play once again, but I think that they're probably going to want to go a little bit bigger this year than they did a season ago, as well as Ivetta Abramyan. She does such great work over at bracketeer.org, does a great job looking at this great game of college basketball. Joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and there's one guy that I think is a foregone conclusion that he's going to be coming back, but I think that we both agree it will be very impactful when it does become actually official. That'd be Ruben Chinyelu over at Florida, because right now he's projected by a lot of people in the second round. I'd be surprised if he stays in the draft, but I was talking about Florida being a top 1, top 2 team between they and Duke in the preseason, and I think that that's a big decision that needs to be made as well, because if they bring back Chinyelu, they pretty much have the entire roster since Walter Clayton from when they won the title 2 years ago, because they're getting back Denzel Aberdeen, who's going to be needing a waiver as well, and I absolutely love the offseason that Florida's had, and honestly, I think that would be a little bit of a downer if Chinyulu does not come back for them.
Yeah, and he's had a great showing at the combine. So that's my only concern, because I thought he was coming back as well. He's been playing phenomenal defense, finding easy buckets. I mean, he's just been just rising. His draft stock has just been rising up the ranks. So that's the only thing that I'm concerned with. I think status quo, he was going to come back. I think he still might, but just the way that he's been performing so far in the combine, I think that might change things. I'm starting to get a little bit uneasy about Ruben's situation. And there's a few of those guys. Jacob Kofi from USC, same thing. He's had a great combine scrimmage. Jeremy Fears has looked good as well. Some of these guys that have scored well in the scrimmages, or they've performed well in other aspects of the combine, or they're just a little worried that they might flip. We might flip them between now and then.
Those are going to be big issues. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to see which of these guys, there's always like one or two surprise guys that stay in the NBA draft, which one of them they might be, because we are noticing more and more guys coming back as well. And I think that's also interesting with the guy that I think is probably going to be the hottest commodity if he does return to school, Milan Mimicevic, because as we know, the NBA game, it needs three-point shooting. He's a guy that has great height. He was amazing over at Iowa State. He's currently in the transfer portal. I think that that's the decision that has the most legs, because he could still return to Iowa State, but I think that they've signed so many guys. I think that they are just assuming that he moves on. And we know that Kentucky very, very much would love to have Milan on their roster as well. But I think that that's one that could have, shall we say, the biggest ripple effect of all these decisions because of the just wide variety of places that he could be going.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he's just so nonchalant about it too, Greg, because he knows, especially when there's a spot for him, like on Kentucky, as a scoring wing, they just need him so bad. So, and he knows that. And I know he mentioned St. John's, Louisville, and UCLA also as possibilities. But then he told reporters that he hasn't been involved in these conversations. Again, I think it's just because he's so confident that he's going to find a place to go. And if he returns to college, he will most likely be one of the top 10 highest paid players in college basketball. There's really no pressure on him to make that decision. And he was quoted saying, if I need to pivot, I'll pivot in a week and a half or two, meaning he's going to milk this as well. And he even said, I don't need to go on a visit or anything. I can probably choose pretty quickly. And there's not a lot of schools that still have a lot of money. So it's not like I'm choosing between 15 schools. It's going to be 3 or 4. That's a quote from him. He knows what's going on. He's playing the system. He kind of knows where he's at. His agent's doing his job. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. I know it's all financial, but can you imagine if Louisville if Louisville gets him? I mean, I can't even imagine.
That would be a case of the rich getting richer, my friend, and they are very, very rich right now. So there's that aspect, and man, we've got a lot with regards to the NBA draft decisions, but I know that there have been a few guys that have caught your eye in the transfer portal, one in particular in Jordan Crawford, who's going to be heading on over to Missouri, and over the last few weeks, who have been a few guys that have caught your eye, because I know that Crawford is a specific one. Any others that you feel like are good fits or maybe just diamonds in the rough that maybe these teams have unearthed here in the last 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, well, Jordan Crawford, I was just thinking of a couple of the later portal editions. So he's an interesting one to me because it wouldn't shock me if he plays a pretty big role for Mizzou this year. He's obviously wonderful for their depth, but I think he has the shooting prowess and the athleticism to hold up in the SEC. So he's gone from Charleston to EKU to South Dakota. He's improved significantly every year as far as his production. So he's not one of those guys, we see a lot of guys that switch schools. Sometimes they make kind of these lateral moves, but he should be a great third guard option behind Jason Crow and Kennard Davis. My only concerns are he is a bit inefficient and he's a bit undersized. So especially for SEC play, I'm very excited to see how he does with Dennis Gates. And then also I have to mention Christian Furman that went from VCU to Tennessee, because that was a very recent move here. And I just think this is interesting because, you and I talked about this new Tennessee, this revamped Tennessee team. And it's just crazy because this guy is 6'10". He redshirted this past season for the Rams, but then he averaged 4.6 points, 3.1 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks per game the previous year. He's a phenomenal depth piece, but I don't think he's SEC caliber as far as an SEC caliber big, but defensively, he's a solid rim protector. He's a decent rim runner offensively. You have multiple scorers. We talked about what is their scoring output projected, like 107 points per game or something. I mean, just insane. They've got Juke, they've got Hill, Ames, Harrelson, Lundblade. And then now you have multiple big rim protectors in Rubin, Lou, and Furman. So they need that depth if they're going to try to pursue a Final Four. I see what they're doing. They're just unloading all the weapons is what they're doing. This Tennessee team, I mean, whatever happened in the Elite Eight they just broke them. It broke them, Greg, because this is the craziest transformation. I mean, they're changing their entire identity almost. So it's really interesting. So I know, again, he's more of a depth piece, but as far as recent portal additions, those two just stood out to me.
Yep, I think that's so well said by you, because right now we are seeing a lot of these power conference teams, unless if you're like a Kentucky or an LSU that is hoping and praying on these NBA draft decisions. Obviously, Vanderbilt with Tyler Tanner as well. They've mostly got their roster in place. They're looking for these depth pieces, so those two I think are going to be big ones. And Jordan Crawford, while he's looking like a little bit of a depth piece right now, I'm with you. I think that he could be a nice, shall we say, sixth man microwave scorer for the Mizzou Tigers, so that's going to be big for them. And what's big on this podcast is always getting on great guests like you, Ivetta. You're doing such an amazing job looking at this great sport all 12 months out of the year. You, Rocco, Robbie, all those guys over at bracketeer.org are doing such an amazing job. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Oh, yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Ivetta Abramyan, Iveetta Abramyan. I try to stay caught up with the world of college basketball as we're traversing these slow months here in the off season. But it's exciting. Again, we have these little mini checkpoints that we can use to stay excited and stay engaged with the sport. And my favorite part of the off season is coming up once the draft deadline passes. And that is, of course, already started. But that's, of course, the scheduling. And I'm just really looking forward to diving in and talking about all the exciting games now that we've figured out our staffs with all the coaching moves and then the rosters. And now we get to dive into the schedule. So please follow me on Twitter. Always appreciate you, Greg, and all the wonderful things you do. And yeah, just looking forward to having more of these conversations in the off season.
Absolutely. And Rocco is the scheduling master over there at bracketeer.org. He does such a great job with that. I know that you and Robbie do a great job in terms of aiding him with all of that, because it is a labor of love what you three do over there. It's incredible, the games that we're going to be getting this season. I know that Rocco gave us a little bit of a teaser earlier in the week about some of the games, and one game in particular that I'm looking forward to, involving a team out there in the Atlantic 10 and a team out there in the American. So want to listen back to that. And Ivetta, she does such an incredible job looking at this great sport. Always great to get her aboard. So big thanks to Ivetta for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, I'll give you a recap of the news and notes that you saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ivetta Abramyan. She's doing such great work over at Basket Under Review, looking at this amazing game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that she's very much hard at work looking at all that we've been getting here in the offseason. Every single time she joins me, she lends such great insights. She did so once again today. So a big thanks to Ivetta for joining me in last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. this is a relatively good pickup in my opinion for UMass Lowell. It's Ja'Kai Newton. He was over at Georgia State this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to UMass Lowell. And for UMass Lowell, they bring in Jaden Harris as well from Eastern Kentucky, Christian Jones from Siena. So they're building themselves a nice backcourt. Would like to see them add a little bit more down low. Typically, when this program is successful, they're doing a great job in terms of just pulverizing the glass. But for Newton, last season, he was averaging about 7 points per game over at Georgia State. Actually began his career over at Indiana. Wasn't able to get any playing time whatsoever over there, but guy that's able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game. Not a great sharpshooter, shot less than 30% from three-point range last season, but a guy that's got some pretty rock-solid experience out there in the Sun Belt. I think that he's going to give a big boost to a UMass Lowell team that they were a little bit down last year, but feels like the arrow is trending upward for them. You've got Peyton Marshall. He was over at Georgia Tech this last season, and he has decided that he is going to be going to Charlotte. For Charlotte, it's been a really good offseason for them. Wes Miller obviously was a failure over at Cincinnati. I just feel like it was a case where I still think that he's a rock-solid coach. It just felt like it wasn't necessarily the world's greatest fit for him, but he's brought so many of these Cincinnati guys, with the main one being Giselle James on over with him. It feels like he's looking to get back to that rough-and-tumble style of defense, and for Charlotte, they're always a slow and controlled team that's based around defense. Bringing in a 7-footer like Marshall, I think is going to be big in terms of maintaining that. They were really lacking that dominant low-post player before, and for Marshall, it's not like he's had amazing success at the college basketball level, about 3 points, 3 rebounds per game last season over at Georgia Tech, but he was part of Overtime Elite. He's a former top 150 recruit. I think that he's going to come in right away, be a dominant force out there in the American, so I do love this pickup for Charlotte, and I like this pickup as well. You've got Jeremiah Dorsey. He was actually at the Division II level last season, but he was averaging in that neighborhood about 16.5 points per game, and he's decided that he is going to be going to Idaho State. Idaho State had themselves a nice year on offense last year. They were absolutely awful on the defensive side of things, but the offense was relatively solid, and for Dorsey, I think that he's going to be able to do a nice job in terms of both facilitating, as he was giving out 4 assists per game, and he's going to up the defense as well. 3 steals per contest as well. That's something that Idaho State was very much lacking last season. For Idaho State, they haven't brought in a ton of Division I guys here. I mean, it's just a case where with a lot of these big West schools, you're probably not going to be landing a lot of big fish or anything like that, but that said, they do have Ty Virgil, who comes over from Pepperdine. He should be able to help out the backcourt. A.L. Harrell, he comes over from Pacific as well. So for Idaho State, this is a really good ad for them. Probably going to need a little bit more down low, but that said, I do think that steps in the right direction are very much being taken. You've got a guy that I really like here in Mr. Jaden Newell. He last season was a pretty much redshirt for Georgia, but that said, he's now heading on over to Jacksonville. And Jacksonville, it feels like things are starting to get in the right direction for them. When they were really having success under Coach Mincy, it was a case where they were doing so on the defensive side of things. They've never really been truly a dominant offensive team, and I don't think that you're going to get some sort of an offensive dynamo here in Mr. Newell, but that said, he's a guy that I think that he had a little bit of fanfare coming out of high school in the state of Florida, just was probably a little bit over his skis a little bit when he decided to commit to Georgia, but that said, for Jacksonville, they've really added here in the offseason. They bring in Newell at 6'8", should be able to help out this team down low. James Morrow was a nice go-to scorer over at South Carolina State last season. J.B. Phillips, double-figure score over at Stetson. Rex Sterling, he was solid over at Wofford. Nehemiah Turner down for what? He provides size coming over from Minnesota. So you do have a few guys that they didn't see a lot of minutes, but were at the power conference level last season, and I think that's going to lead to Jacksonville being able to restore some order down low, being a much better team than they were a season ago. And then you got Kyle Layton. He last season was over at Eastern Illinois. Now, Layton, unfortunately, did not get out there on the floor last season for Eastern Illinois. Last we saw him was over at Tennessee Tech, where he averaged 8.2 points, CO per contest, shot about 35% from 3 in Grambling. They were a wreck of a team in terms of taking care of the ball last season, a team that very much values being able to generate turnovers. So I do think that this is going to be a relatively solid ad for them, and I do think that he's going to be able to fit the system quite well as well. For Layton, the big thing is being able to stay healthy, but I do think that this is a solid ad, and for Grambling State, it's not a team that has added a ton via the transfer portal. It's been a little bit slow going for them thus far. They're going to be probably adding a lot of guys from more of the junior college level, what have you, but also bringing in Isaiah Miranda, a true 7-footer from Long Island, a former top 200 recruit, Jose Grullon, who is a double-figure scorer 2 seasons ago over at UT Martin. They have landed some really nice pieces, so I do like what they've been able to do here in the offseason. Melo Sanchez, he was over at Central Connecticut last season. He's heading on over to South Dakota. He was a really good scorer over at Hawaii Pacific at the D2 2 ranks a few seasons ago. Redshirted at Arkansas. This last season shot 43% from three-point range. He was a big part of the reason why Central Connecticut was able to take down Rutgers and Boston College outside the conference as well. A little bit of a one-trick pony guy, but the one trick that he's able to give you is pretty good. And for South Dakota, this is a team that's very much looking to run and gun it. Year in and year out, they're a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. They look to be able to have really good guard play. 2 years ago, they were one of the best teams in terms of taking care of the ball in all of college basketball. Last year, that really waned, and as a result, they had themselves a less than tremendous season, to say the least, so he should be able to help out in that regard a little bit, and bringing in someone like Kate Kyerman from Iowa State is going to be able to help out a bit. You've got Steph Busiel, who was over at Duquesne last season. He's going to be able to help out in terms of size as well. So I like what South Dakota's done here in the offseason. I don't think that they're going to be competing for any sort of like a conference title or anything like that, but they made some good pieces. They made some good moves to be able to give themselves a chance to be much more competitive in the conference this season. KJ Bradley, he was over at San Diego this last season, and he has decided that he is going to be going to CSU Bakersfield, meet me for the Roadrunners, and as we know for the Roadrunners, last season the pimp situation was not great for them, to say the least. They had to just really try to turn over a new leaf, and for Bakersfield, they haven't necessarily brought in a ton of guys thus far, but the guys that they've been able to bring in have actually been very solid ads. You bring in Bradley, who 2 seasons ago, because he redshirted last year over at San Diego, he was a 14-plus point per game scorer. Bryce Cofield is the main other guy that they bring in from Fullerton. He was a double-figure scorer last year for Fullerton, a guy that's able to give you a few rebounds. Doesn't necessarily do one thing great, but does everything relatively solid for Bradley. He's going to be a little bit more of a main facilitator with about 3.5 assists, 1.7 steals per contest 2 seasons ago. Not a guy that's going to light you up from 3, and he did turn the ball over a little bit more than what you'd like, but it feels like Bakersfield finally starting to get online after last season. When you lose your coach weeks before the start of the season, you know that things are going to be rough for them, so they've been able to just put that in the rearview mirror, and it feels like now they're going to be able to trudge forward with what I think is a much better roster than it was a season ago. Edwin Suarez, he last season was over at Weber State. He has decided that he's going to be going to Temple. We give our O to Lane Kiffin go Owls. Now for Temple, he's not going to be the guy with a ton of size to be able to lift them over the top. That said, Temple, year in and year out, they've been absolutely laying basic down low, and bringing in someone like a Suarez, I think, is going to be able to help out big time with this, as he was able to supply about 6 rebounds, 9 points per game last season, and is actually a native of the state of Pennsylvania, went to high school out there in the state as well, so he's got some ties to the Philadelphia area. You do like to see that, and for Temple, it's always a team that's based around good three-point shooting. Adam Fisher, he's a disciple of that Micah Shrewsbury system from Penn State, and I still think that for Temple, it's going to be a little bit of a rough slog for them, as I just don't feel like the pieces have really been able to fit together, but being able to help out their low post play a little bit, I think is a step in the right direction, so I do like what they've done here, and there's some like a Sir Isaac Heron, who was over at Louisiana Tech. I think that these two guys can play well in tandem with one another. KJ Martin, he was over at Tulsa last season, and he's decided that he's going to be heading on over to San Jose State, guy that just really didn't see a lot of minutes this last year, about 2 points, 1.5 rebounds per game, but for San Jose State, they've been making some nice moves over this last season, and in the very limited amount of minutes that Martin saw, he's saying 6'8", he was shooting about 39% from 3-point range. It helps out a San Jose State team that they're still going to need to help out themselves a little bit down low. They were just absolutely lambasted in the post a season ago, but they made a few moves to be able to help out with that a little bit tonight. Eddie Bedry should be able to help out with that. They added in their Mookie Cook as well, so I do like that. And for Martin, with him being about 6'8", even though he's able to pop it from 3-point range, I think that he's going to be able to help out on the post a little bit. Still bearish on the San Jose State team, but it does feel like things are getting a little bit better for them. You've got Helvine Delzat, who was over at Cincinnati this last season, 2.2 rebounds per game as a 6'10" big man. He was in the shadow of the likes of Bob Miller and company, but he's decided that he's going to be heading on over to Seattle. For Seattle, losing so many guys like Huron Don and company in the offseason, that really hurts them, but being able to add in there a guy that really helps out this team's identity. That's defense. That's being able to really control the post. They were good in terms of generating turnovers, so they had their Mason Williams from Iowa State. They had in their Tyler Boston from Holy Cross. I like the small moves that Seattle's made. They've also brought in a guy or two from the non-D1 ranks. They are going to be losing quite a bit from a season ago. They're still going to leave a lot to be desired on offense, and I don't think that they're getting a guy here in Delzit who's going to be able to give you a ton on the offensive side of things, but on the defensive side of things, I think that he's going to be rock solid. solid, so love this, and I do like this move as well. Timothy Radulski. Last season, he was a relatively solid scorer over at Bryant. He was able to give that team 13 points, 4.5 boards, one of the lone respectable players for that team. Shot about 36% from three-point range, and he is heading on over to Pittsburgh. For Pittsburgh, they have become the Noah's Ark here in the offseason. They now have two of everything. Now, how these pieces are going to be able to fit together, nobody has any earthly idea. And for Jeff Capel, it's been a rough go of it for him over the last few seasons. That said, I actually do like some of the pieces that they brought in. Jonathan Mumu Powell over from UNC is solid. Bain Dongo, I like what he's going to be able to bring to the table. Jaleel Bethea, he comes over from Alabama. So they've got nice pieces. How they're all going to be able to intertwine together, I have no idea, but this is another good ad for them. So I do like this one on that front. Micah Curtis, he was over at North Dakota this last season, limited to 3 games due to injury. When he was actually out there on the floor at 6'8", 1.7 blocks, 8.5 points per game, he's decided that he is going to be heading on over to Wyoming. For Wyoming, Sundance Wicks is just such a great coach, and he's able to do so much more with so much less. We haven't seen Wyoming make any sort of splash moves or anything like that, and that's by design. This is a team where the whole is greater than some of its parts. They're also bringing in Parker Garrett, who was a guy that was able to pop it a little bit from 3 over at Washington State. Renas Saunders was a nice scorer over at Louisiana Monroe, but not a main guy. It feels like Wyoming is just going to be embracing good, tough defense. They're going to have everyone just doing their role, and I think that he's another one of these guys that's going to be able to fit with that system as well. You've got Xavier Thomas. He has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Lindenwood after at Division II Saginaw Valley was shooting about 34.5% from 3. Keep in mind that for this Lindenwood program, they were at the Division II ranks just a few seasons ago. He's able to generate some turnovers, which is what Lindenwood did such a good job of. They guarded the three-point line well. They generated turnovers. They have had no three-point shooting whatsoever over the last few seasons. So, the fact that I say that he's shooting 34.5% from 3, that makes him one of the best three-point shooters on the roster. And even if they could just be a country average team in terms of their three-point shooting, that would help them out quite a bit. They've already brought in Dom Clay for North Dakota State. Xavier Spencer was a nice go-to scorer over at Louisiana Monroe last season. So, they're taking steps in the right direction. Lindenwood might finally be a force at the Division I level. So, I like this ad for them. And then for South Carolina State's Jaden Johnson, he has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Bowling Green. And he was a nice scorer last year. 13.5 points, 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals per contest. Now for South Carolina State, they really didn't do a lot well out there in the MEAC. They were a completely outgunned team, but now you bring in there a guy that's able to do a little bit of everything. I really like what he was able to show last season. Shot 37% from three-point range, and with his active hands, he's going to fit very well for a Bowling Green team that's a top 50 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They've had Javante Campbell over the last 2 seasons be one of the best players in terms of being able to help just press that style in general. With him now being out of the fold, they need to turn over a new leaf, so they bring in Juan Cranford from Eastern Kentucky, Tristan Beckford from South Florida, but now you've got a guy that, albeit it was for a rough team, it was for a team that was in a just rough situation in general, but being able to have a guy that was able to be one of the main go-to scorers, a guy that was really relied upon to carry the mail, I think is big for them. And then Evan Otten, he was over at Idaho State this last season, averaged only about 4.5 points, 4 boards, 2 blocks per contest. He was a Big Sky all-defensive pick, but guy that's not going to give you a lot on offense. He has decided that he's going to Arizona. Now for Arizona, right now the big news is whether or not they're going to be getting Koa Pete back. This is nothing more than filling out roster spot number 11, number 12, but it does give them a little bit more insurance down low because Montevis Krivas, he's going to be rock solid down low. Aganes Jervisich, who comes over from Nebraska, he helps out a little bit as well, but for Arizona, just being able to continue to be a rock solid team down low, now being able to have a little bit of depth, that's huge. And we always want to have depth with having great podcasts every single day. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Good Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And a big thanks to Ivetta Abramyan. She does great work over at bracketeer.org. She joined me in the last segment, coming at you guys every single day on this podcast. Once things get a little bit more clear with these rosters, I'm going to give you guys a conference preview on all these 32 conferences, and then once we get back in season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.